just wanted to thank you guys all for coming today. Really appreciate that. Today we're going to talk about growing and cooking common herbs. And so obviously a very hot topic. I've gotten emails on cooking and on growing like a lot. You know, everybody has a personal question, so hopefully we can answer some of them so that you don't have problems. And then Anne, I'm sure, might be a great idea if she would share the plant clinic information because they're awesome. We have a really good resource that could work great for you guys. So today, my name is Andrea Nicolai, and I work for the University of Florida Extension in Polk County, as does Anne. And I'm the Family and Consumer Science Agent, so I'm a registered dietitian, so I love talking about food and nutrition. So I'm get to talk about that part and what herbs can do for you. And then Anne, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Anne Yassalanis. I'm the residential horticulture extension agent, and I coordinate the Master Gardener program in Polk County as well.
Okay, so today you might see there's a, so here's, if you haven't used Zoom, some of you haven't, then here's what will pull up, right? And so sometimes the controls go away and you can kind of hover over the bottom of the screen and then they will usually pop up again, hopefully. And so what you can do, there should be a ... And then if you click on that, it's like, says more, and then there's a chat option. So that's where people are typing in things on the chat box. So you can see what other people said, and then you can also type in a question yourself if you want. Like someone just put in, my basil is taking over my life. So we have an evaluation, and we just want to know how we could make this class even better. So we really appreciate your feedback. So I'll send that after the presentation, and it's just a few questions. So you just click little bubbles, and then so you can help us be better. So thank you for doing that ahead of time. So Anne, would you like to share your slide then? Stop sharing mine.
Sure.
See if this works okay for us.
Okay. Sorry, we're going back and forth with the slide sharing, but it's just a thing with Zoom. So today we're going to talk about growing herbs. That's the part that I'm going to cover, and I'm going to talk about not all, but a few of the common herbs that we can grow in Central Florida. And since there are people from other states and countries, these are probably herbs that you can grow as well, maybe just at a different time of year. And then Andrea is going to talk a little bit about preserving herbs and using them in cooking as well. And we will take the questions at the end. Okay, so we're going to start with growing herbs. And these are some graphics from the university. And we have one for spring and one for fall. And even though it's really hot out, we are actually planning and prepping for fall and cool weather gardening at this point. I know, seems very strange. These are the herbs you can plant in the spring, and these are the herbs that you can plant in the fall, which if you're looking at them going, okay, they all seem to be the exact same herbs, and they really are. There's really just two exceptions, and those are in our fall gardens in Central Florida, we can grow our bulbing type of herbs, which would be garlic and fennel. They take quite a few months from planting to harvest, so they need a long span of time to develop, and that is during our cooler months. So we're planting fennel and garlic in the fall, but we're not harvesting them for a few months later. Okay, so best location for an herb garden. There were some questions about, issues people have had growing herbs in different places, and they can be grown in a variety of locations. You can grow them in the ground, you can grow them in a container. I would suggest that they are grown outside. Really select a location that makes it easy and convenient for you to harvest them and use them, in addition to them having all those requirements they need to grow, such as the proper sunlight, water, soil, that sort of thing. You want to make it easy to use. It's real hard to want to use the things that you're growing if it's difficult to, get out in the yard and actually go pick them. I know I had to move my vegetable garden. It was way out in the yard. I had to put shoes on, and that was a distracting thing for me. I didn't want to go out there and put shoes on, so I moved it right outside the door, and wouldn't you know, now I use the herbs a lot more. So you can grow them in containers, as you see here, raised beds right in with your vegetables. There are hydroponic systems you can use. That's the picture in the bottom right there. And you can even mix them in as part of your landscape as well. So that top right picture there shows a big rosemary. Gets very large here in Central Florida, makes a great small shrub. There's some varieties that I'll show you pictures of later that would make a great ground cover or edging. So really very, lots of different ways and places that you can grow herbs, but I would suggest that they are grown either outside, porch or patio is fine. It is difficult to grow them inside. Lots of ways to get your herbs started as well. So we can certainly purchase and start from seed, and that will be both annual and perennial herbs. So annuals would be 1 season-ish, and perennials would last longer than 1 season. And the reason I said 1 season-ish is because if you've grown herbs before, sometimes they don't follow the exact calendar of what we know as fall. Sometimes you start them early and you can get them to go a little bit longer, but really we can't expect too much from them, and we can't expect those annual herbs to last years and years. There are perennials you can start from cuttings. So that means, snipping off a piece of that plant and starting it from that. And also you can propagate and start herbs from division. So what that means is some of our larger herbs, the perennial herbs, rosemary, chives, tarragon, some of those, you can actually take the plant and split it up into smaller plants. So that's a great way to share with people. Also, if it's getting too big where you have it, and you want it to be smaller, but still, allow it to live, or even, plant it in other places in your landscape or in other pots or things like that, you can divide them up. And then if you've grown mint, that spreads by runners, and those are really easy to root, those runners in water, or just by kind of sticking them in the soil as well. When we look at designing our herb garden, there's lots of different ways that we can do that. If you're not really sure what you want to grow, I would start with the stuff that you like to eat, maybe the things that you routinely purchase at the grocery store. So you don't have to do that anymore. If you just want to try something or do something fun, you can look at some of these themed type of gardens. If you have a friend that's willing to give you some seeds or cuttings or something like that, that could also be a really good place to start. Many people choose to grow their herbs in containers, and that works really well. You can also do hanging baskets for some of those herbs that tend to drape a little bit more. I mentioned outside. If you grow them inside, you do have to make sure they are in full sun, and they probably won't last as long. If you really, really want to keep them inside, if you could every once in a while let them have some outside time, that would probably help them hang on a little bit longer. And we follow our fertilization and soil prep for herbs in containers just like our vegetables. So that means a nice, well-drained soil, watering when the soil is moist. Minimal fertilization unless there's issues going on with the plants. And you can see some examples here of some containerized herbs. There's a few mixes. Now you can see that top one has 3 different plants in it, one of them being rosemary, which can get really, really big. So it all will depend on the size of the container that you're putting the herbs in, as far as how many you can plant in there. Really, a rosemary probably could be in a very large container all by itself. Where I have a basil and then a flat leaf and a curled leaf parsley in a fairly large pot, and they do fine. So it is important, just like any plant, that you know how big it's going to get, so you know if it needs to be by itself or just one other plant in a container, and how big of a container you should be using for those herbs. And then again, don't forget that many of the herbs make great ornamental plants, and you can plant them right in the landscape. So that large picture on the left there, you can see in the foreground, you can see rosemary makes a really, really nice shrub. And in the picture on the bottom right, you can see not only have they used vegetables, this garden has a great mix of a lot of edible plants as landscape plants. They've used blueberries as shrubs. Here you can see chives as kind of a ornamental grass lining a bed. You can see the ornamental kale in there as well. So anytime you can stick an edible plant right in with your ornamentals, that's a great way to get started too. You know, it doesn't take any extra materials. You don't have to build anything. You don't have to purchase extra soil, but you can start an herb pretty easily that way. So we're going to cover a few of the common herbs in Central Florida that Andrea will then talk about each of them individually as well. And I'll talk about them from a growing perspective while she'll talk about them from a cooking perspective. So basil, someone mentioned their basil was growing crazy. Mine too. It's about pesto time, I think. So mine's pretty big. I just pinched off some of the flower blooms today so I can keep it going, but really needs to be cut all the way back. This is an annual plant, many types, and I'll show you some of the pictures here in a minute. It makes a great potted plant, real easy to grow in a container. You can start it from seed in the spring or the fall, and you can use those fresh or dried leaves as well in your cooking. Here are some of the varieties. You can really have fun with a lot of the herb varieties that are available now. There are just so many new ones on the market. And the neat thing about them is they look really cool in your cooking. So adding purple leaves to, you know, a salad or something, that looks really good. But it also looks really good in your landscape and in containers as well. So you can see something like maybe that purple ruffles basil with some flowers in a container is very attractive. So you can see they make great plants in addition to providing us with food. All right, our next one is dill. This is a more erect, kind of thin, wispy looking annual herb. It can get up to 4 feet tall depending on variety, and I'll show you several varieties here in a minute. It has really nice yellow flowers, and those will develop into the seeds, which you can then collect. And any of these that you decide to let go to seed, you can certainly collect and sow later. So you can start dill seeds in November, and you can plant them all the way through spring. And you can use all portions of dill in your cooking. So here's some different varieties of dill. You can see Hera there. That's one that's real dense, lots of foliage. The bouquet is the most widely grown one, and you can see in the picture there what the flowers look like. And you can also see the dried seed head. The fern leaf dill has a little bit of a different leaf shape than kind of the common dill that you're used to seeing. Okay, this is parsley. Curly leaf is the most common type of parsley grown, but you can plant both flat leaf and curly leaf parsley now. It's a cool season vegetable, and you can plant it anytime. I did have some growing through the summer, but it was a little tricky. It wasn't a big fan. So this is a good time of year to get it started from seed. You can also start it later from container plant. So if you're a little late on your seasons getting these plants started from seed, you can always start with a containerized plant. You'd have to find that at a local nursery. There's some fun varieties of parsley as well. You can see there the curly leaf variety looks a little bit different. So just a different texture in your herb garden. And then Lisette is a more heat tolerant, more compact type of parsley. Cilantro. So sometimes people have a hard time telling the difference between cilantro and parsley. But if we flip real quick back to that previous slide, look at that flat leaf parsley there. See how those parsley leaves come to a point? Cilantro is rounded. So that's a really easy way. I think you could probably taste one and know in about 1 second which one is which as well. But if you didn't want to, tempt that, it's a quick way to tell. So very tangy flavor. You can start seed as well. It does have to be scarified, meaning it has to be kind of rubbed on sandpaper before you plant it. So you may want to select a containerized planting to get it started. This does like cooler weather. So anyone trying to grow cilantro in Central Florida in the summer is probably going to have a tough time. It does prefer our fall and winter temperatures. It is pretty small when it grows, so it does not take up a lot of space in a container. Rosemary, this is a perennial, almost shrub-like herb. Has a very nice aroma, so it's something that you could even plant. And I did this, I planted it by the front door. So if someone were to, you know, rub against it as you walk to the door, it has a nice smell. It's very drought tolerant. Has these kind of small, narrow leaves and really nice pink flowers as well. And you can start this from cuttings. You can start from containerized plant. And here you can see some of the different varieties that are available that just, you know, have a very different look in the landscape and are very attractive. So that one in the left there, the prostrate rosemary, so that's more of a weeping. You can see it in the pot in the middle as well. So that's really nice as a kind of an edging type ground cover or in a hanging basket or container. And then barbecue, if you can guess what that's used for, that's they use that for skewers. Now you can use a regular rosemary for skewers, but barbecue has been cultivated with those long straight stems so that you can, you know, pull off all those middle leaves and leave that little tuft of leaves at the end and have some really fun kebab type skewers for barbecuing. Okay, moving into our oregano. Typically we see Cuban oregano or Greek oregano used. They look very, very different and are dissimilar in taste, but you tend to use them in the same way. So the Cuban oregano has a very thick leaf, and I'll show you a picture in a minute, very large, and the Greek oregano has a little tiny leaves. You can start them by seed. Cuban oregano does really well by cuttings. And let me show you the picture here because you can really see the difference between the Cuban and oregano and Greek oregano in those top two photographs. So again, that Cuban oregano has a very thick, succulent type of leaf. I have some growing now, and I would say the leaf across is probably 4 inches or so. It's got a really big leaf, where my Cuban oregano, it's maybe 1/2 inch to inch across. So if you're having trouble identifying those, they do look very different. Both really attractive in a container. The Cuban oregano, that is all that I have growing in the container because it gets quite large. And you can see, again, just like that basil, where there's some different color variations of the leaves, the golden oregano and the variegated Cuban oregano, you know, great combined with flowers and make a really attractive ornamental plant for the landscape as well. Mint, lots of people very familiar with mint and have grown one of the many varieties of mint that are available, and you can see them here. They're one of the easiest to grow perennials. Typically what you see is spearmint, but chocolate mint, pineapple mint, lots of them available. And again, you can see they look a little bit different, so you can combine them with other plants in the landscape for something very interesting. They do propagate by runners. So what that means is they're going to kind of spread in the landscape. So if you do not want them to do that, I would suggest putting them in a container. So you can see that picture in the bottom right there shows a mint growing in a container. That's all that's in that container. It's really attractive that way. I have one in a raised bed and it's doing very well. And then something maybe even like the pineapple mint, combining it with some flowering perennials, salvias, pentas, that sort of thing, makes a really attractive plant in a container. Next we have tarragon. This is a perennial herb, grows in a nice little clump, almost like a small shrub. I actually had it as an edging plant. Very narrow pointed leaves, looks like a rosemary, but not that thick kind of rough leaf that a rosemary would have. Also has really nice yellow flowers. You can see in this photo here. You can purchase it in a container, start it from seed. Really attractive plant for the landscape if you do decide to put it in with your ornamental plantings. It does well in a container as well. This is thyme. This is a perennial herb, kind of like rosemary and oregano. They kind of get woody, and what that means is they kind of get like brown stems on them as they age. This can be short-lived here in Central Florida because it tends to like a drier climate. Make sure you plant it in well-drained soil. Can be tricky to grow in the summertime, again, because of all of the rainfall. So don't be offended if it doesn't last very long for you. You could even try it in a container where you're moving it kind of in and out to prevent it from getting quite so waterlogged in the summertime. There's some really pretty varieties of thyme. It looks beautiful in a container when planted by itself, grows well in the ground. So you've seen it probably in other areas of the country, you know, planted around, you know, stepping stones, some of those real short varieties of thyme. And when you walk on the stepping stones, you have that nice aroma of thyme. And that's a great thing to do. I have grown thyme in the ground here, and it will last for a little while, but I don't think I've ever gotten it to grow in the ground for over a year. But it did last for more than one season, so I was happy about that. The variegated lemon thyme is also really, really pretty. Anything that has those kind of white edges, that white variegation, looks really nice planted with our flowering perennials. And we have sage. Lots of people familiar with sage. This is another one to start in the fall using seeds, containers, cuttings. Sage kind of has a fuzzy kind of leaf texture and can be hard to grow through the summer. It's just that moisture and humidity is really tough on it. It kind of has a grayish hue, so it's a real attractive plant. There are some varieties that are variegated as well. You can see on the right, the golden sage has a green leaf with a yellow variegation. And then on the bottom, we've got the tricolor sage there, kind of emerges purple. And then the edges of the older growth are white. So all three varieties are very attractive in containers. You can grow it in the ground, real easy to grow. And then my last herb I'm going to talk about today is lemon balm, one of my favorites. Looks very similar to like a mint leaf. While a mint leaf is kind of thick, the lemon balm leaf is very thin and delicate, and it grows much more upright than your mint will, but you can use it in a lot of similar ways. So it grows very similar to like a basil. It'll, you know, be about 2 feet tall, not very wide. You can start it from seed cuttings or container. And usually you can take it over multiple seasons. And there's some varieties as well. The leaves of the lemon balm are a little more pointed than a mint leaf as well. But you can definitely tell it if you have both of them together and you can feel the texture. That's a real easy way to tell the difference. But it's a fun one to try. It does, again, great in a container, and very easy to grow in the fall. Just some things to mention as you grow and harvest your herbs. If you are harvesting them, you can, again, prolong their life by doing so. So right now, thinking about our basil that's really tall, I mentioned that I pinched back a flower. So when I let it go to flower, it will then produce seeds, which is good if I want to collect seeds and save them and sow them later. So I might want to do that. If I don't want to do that, another option would be to really cut it back, take all that basil inside and do something with it in the kitchen, and then allow it to hopefully sprout back up again and produce more foliage. So they're kind of two different, you know, things you can do with your herbs, and either is fine. It just kind of depends on if you're ready to collect seed, it's the end of the season, you don't think it'll make it any longer, or you really want the seeds, or you want to see if you can extend that growing season a little bit longer by cutting it back. So, you know, it's not going to kill the basil because it's so big now and, you know, it's going to flower. Oh, I don't want to cut it back, but that will help prolong the life of it if you could just kind of take it to the ground and use that foliage and allow it to come back again. It'll probably keep going a couple more months. So all parts, sometimes roots can be used for flavoring, and those come from the oils in the leaves and seeds. I would suggest using the younger leaves They have a better flavor as you're harvesting. So remember that as you go along and use some of your plants. If you're going to use them at a later date, they will need to dry very quickly. That can be tricky in Florida with our moisture. You can't really, you know, set them out on the back patio and think that they'll dry soon. And Andrea has some information on that as well. There are different ways that you can dry herbs. You can also harvest seeds from your plant to continue on to share with friends. So you'll let the plant go to flower, and then the seeds will be there after the flowers fall off. And so let those seeds mature and let that seed head form. It will usually be a brownish color, and you can take those seeds off, allow the seeds to dry if you're going to be packaging them in anything and, you know, saving them for, you know, the next season or something like that. You don't want to package them away if they're newly harvested seeds. So dry those out, label them for storing later. Okay, we're going to continue on. I'll stop my sharing and continue on, and Andrea will talk about cooking with herbs. And then we'll get to the questions at the end. That way we can go through and get everything answered.
And can you see it okay without anything blocking it?
You're good.
All right. All right. Thank you, guys. So just quick talking about herbs, and then we'll get to all the questions, or as many as we can anyway. So just today, just want to kind of talk about storing and preparing them, cooking them, freezing and drying them, because you did so much work, you know, getting them to grow. And so just trying to think of some different ways to actually use them. So just a reminder, like overall big picture, herbs are the leaves of the plants. So they don't have the woody stems. They grow close to the ground in the mild climates. And then spices, so they're more native to the warm tropical climates, and they're from like the roots, the flowers, the fruits, the seeds, and the bark. So you can get different examples of those, but just those tend to be smaller or stronger and more potent in flavor. So you use less usually. So it's kind of like the cloves versus the basil. Okay, so just wanted to also say, you know, something really important. There's a lot of benefits to the herbs other than just they smell good. They're, you know, they have virtually no calories, no fat, right? But they add a lot of flavor and they enhance the food. And so what they can do for us is that can allow us then to, you know, reduce the use of salt, which we know we want to do, try to use less salt, and then reduce the sugar too, and also the fat. So besides all that, so they help you, like, you know, use less of the things we don't want to use as much of. They have health benefits within themselves. So in a couple of weeks, I'm doing a class called Health Benefits of Herbs and Spices, but it is amazing what the different ones can do for you. Just, you know, just they really help you themselves. They're like, somebody told me once, they're like little salads themselves. So just trying to add them when you can would be awesome, right? Okay, so really quick thing. Also, just, you know, they gave, just for an example, 148 adults. So they gave you guys like 3 different things. So they gave you meatloaf and then 2 side dishes. And so they made one of the meals all full fat. And then they made one of them reduced fat. So they cut out some of the fat in like the side dishes and the meatloaf. And then they used another one where they cut out the fat. And then they also added herbs in there just to give it some more flavor. And they found that all those people, then they, you know, did blind taste test and they ranked them. And the people liked the full fat versions and the ones with the spices equally. And then they liked the reduced fat one just a little bit less. So what I'm trying to say is, you know, adding some herbs can help you to, you know, really still love the meal, even if you subtract something else. And so just some ideas on reducing the salt. You know, these are some herbs that can be really great salt replacers, kind of have that trigger that mouthfeel, especially celery seed, you know, garlic powder instead of the garlic salt, right? And so these have like a natural kind of, I guess, you know, flavor of that salt in a way. And so that's why they're good. Same with baking then. If you reduce the sugar, try adding, they call them the warming spices, like cinnamon, ginger, allspice, cloves, and then vanilla. So storage, there's multiple ways to do it. So we'll just talk about some of those, but the fresh, frozen, and dried, the drawbacks of frozen would be, they're limp, obviously, when they're thawed. And the dried are great, they never actually spoil if you dry them correctly, but they do lose the flavor and aroma eventually. And so I'm guessing a lot of you are at home right now, but if you're at work or something, when you get home, you'll have to check your McCormick spices. If we have those, just check about quality, right? If there's no best by date on them, then they are at least 16 years old. So they added a best by date in 2004. And so sometimes I will, ask in the class, how many people have ones that are over 1 year old, over 5 years old, and things like that. But it's really interesting, some people keep them for a long time. You might need some more, but, to test the quality, you just kind of, crush it with your hand. And so, except for black pepper, those, I don't know if you guys remember, McCormick used to make rectangular tins. So you might still see that, you still see them with black pepper, but they stopped making those tins except for the black pepper 27 years ago. So if any of you guys have any, they're at least 27 years old. So just fun thing, maybe those aren't as potent anymore. So just some tips here then would be to wash and dry before storing. And I, kind of went back and forth on that. Usually with fruits, especially like strawberries and things like that, you want to wash them right before eating. But they've done some tests and they found that unwashed herbs started to show signs of decay before the washed ones did. And they were thinking probably because of surface debris and bacteria on the herbs that, cause more rapid decay. So maybe if you don't have, ones that have a lot of that, maybe you could wait to wash them, but otherwise it might actually help prolong them. And then some other ideas, figure out what herb you're working with for storage, right? So the soft herbs, they have those delicate stems. That's how I can tell. It's like if they have a woody stem that you wouldn't want to eat, those are harder herbs. But the soft ones, you could store them in a bouquet, kind of like the picture I have there. And then you put a bag over them in the fridge. And that can, it's worked really well for me with cilantro and parsley, where they can last weeks in the fridge. And so basil is special. You do it the same way, but it doesn't really like the cold. So it's fine on the counter or can be your table centerpiece until you eat it, right? And then the hard ones with the woody stems, those would be great with a damp paper towel. So things like rosemary and sage, I guess, oregano. Let me think what else. Anne can list these off time. And so just taking those in a damp paper towel and storing them that way can really prolong them. So how to prepare them? So there's different ways. You can roughly chop them, you can chiffonade sprigs, you can use the sturdy herbs. So when you use the sturdy ones, those are the harder stem ones. One really easy way to get the rosemary off is to just run your fingers the opposite direction that it's growing, right? And it'll just take it all off. And that'll do the same with things like thyme and usually oregano. It works well too. So anything where you like the stem looks woody, you can just brush your hand over the opposite way that it's growing and get the herb off really easily. And then the tender ones, just some people remove the stems, but the stems have a lot of flavor. So definitely, if you can save them for stocks or something like that, or if you just want a little bit more flavor in your dish, they would be great to just throw in there. So there's nothing wrong with using the basil, the parsley, and the cilantro stems. Sometimes people are really trying to avoid them, but they just have more flavor. So, and then trying, too, when you're cutting them, probably, the chiffonade. So those would be narrow ribbons. So you could stack like 5 or 6 leaves and then roll them, and then you can cut it into ribbons. So it makes it really pretty for your dish. And one thing you want to keep in mind when you're using the herbs is to try to avoid bruising them, just to retain the most optimal flavor. And you're like, what does that mean? It just means you don't want to kind of overcut them. So the harder ones will tolerate it a little bit easier, but those ones with the softer stems, somebody told me once, she's kind of like, you can work it right into the cutting board. You look at the cutting board and you can see the herbs like embedded in there. And so you're losing the flavor then when you chop it that much. So trying to use a sharp knife and just give it a few chops, that'll help keep the optimal flavor. And then when you look at recipes, sometimes you're like, well, how do I use all this basil, or what am I gonna do? So you can look at recipes and you can think, when you're using fresh herbs, you can use 3 times as much as a dried. So if you find a recipe that uses dried herbs, you can replace them with the fresh. And, sometimes your dried herbs, if they're really old, the fresh would have more flavor. So just factor that in. And, try, when you're using them, just try like about 1 teaspoon. So for like the dish or so, and then you can always add more for ground beef or something like that. Just try 1 teaspoon at first of the dried, and then or 3 of the fresh, and trying the flavor. You can always add more, but can't take it out. So delicate herbs. So these are the ones with the softer stems we were talking about. These are ones you want to add at the last minutes before it's served. So they're kind of like the things that's the garnish, you sprinkle it on at the end. So if you put parsley in your chili at the very beginning, it just loses its flavor. It's not its fault, but it can't hold up that well. And so trying to add those at the end then. And so they have to be volatile like that. They're very aromatic, and so they're more delicate and things like that. And if they were growing in this warm weather, they need to be able to lose their moisture and things like that. So that's why they're so easily, destroyed when you cook them. So the less delicate ones would be oregano, rosemary, sage, and thyme, and those can be added earlier. So they actually, impart the flavor throughout the meal then as you cook. So just a couple really quick popular fresh foods and fresh herbs and food combinations. So I could talk about this all day, but just, there's so many different things. So I was kind of going to give some general ideas, and then, a few more specific. So just in general, right, you can use them to complement a side dish, right? Just think about like rosemary potatoes or cilantro in your salsa. So just adding them with vegetables, oregano and basil, great with vegetables. And then using them as the main condiment too. So if you have a lot of anything, these are great. Like pestos and chimichurri is a very common, like a popular one right now. And that one has parsley, and it also can have cilantro and oregano, but it's Argentinian sauce. And so it's used with meat, or can be a great dipping sauce, marinade, vegetables. And so that's that picture on the bottom there. It's just, we made some. And you can also use it in seasonings and garnish. And I have to tell you too, I can, with all the things we're gonna send you, we'll send you a recipe for any herb pesto. So it's just like, you can use basil for pesto, but you can also use any other herb also. So there's nothing wrong with that. And same thing with, what was I thinking? Like dressing, right? So you can use any herb and make your own salad dressing. So it doesn't have to be one or the other. And then just what we were talking about, saving the stalks can add a lot of flavor. So just some ideas on adding edible garnishes. I just remember, and you guys probably know too, when you go to the restaurants, you get the curly leaf parsley. So, it has a lot of health benefits. So just fun fact, if you are growing parsley, the one more chefs prefer would be the flat leaf one, just because they feel it has more flavor. And then the curly one would be more for a garnish. So just thinking about ways that you can really, just spice up your plate and just add a little bit more beauty, but also health by putting those herbs in there. So here are some examples, right? So basil, it's great with tomatoes and mozzarella, and watermelon and feta brings out that a lot too. And I have a coworker who actually, when she runs out of spinach, she uses basil in her smoothies. So just thinking about different ways, like, being open to other ideas. And then oregano works really well in any Greek or Italian dishes. So that's an awesome way to include it there. also with Latin America dishes. So it goes really well with a lot. Mint is really good with sweet things like, you have mint chocolate, right? So then thinking about desserts, adding them with desserts as garnish or with fruit salads can be really good. And rosemary, just what Anne was talking about, using the rosemary stem as a skewer can be great in potatoes and meats. And then cilantro can be used in a lot of different ways too. So the garnishes can take many forms, you can see there. And then freezing and drying. So this is important too if you want to preserve them. So freezing them in oil or water. So you can do that in an ice cube tray. A lot of people have a lot of luck with that. And then you can just pop out those cubes. So you put the herbs in there and then you cover it with either oil or water and then freeze it. And so you can pop out the cubes when you need it, or you can just store them in a Ziploc bag in your freezer. Then you can throw them in the dishes to give the extra flavor, like in your tomato sauce or something like that. And then drying them, right? So that's another really good option. So, rinsing them, and Anne talked about this a little bit, but just trying to leave them in a well-ventilated area and avoiding sunlight, indoors is okay, just because the sunlight, especially with the more delicate ones with those soft stems that I was talking about, the sun, drying them in the sun would decrease their color. So they're ready to store once they're crisp, dry, and crumble easily. So you store them in dark containers and away from the light. So that's how you keep them the longest. So drying them, then you can air dry, so kind of what we talked about. And then there's also the microwave oven and dehydrator. So dehydrator works great because you can control the temperature. The oven is also an option, but you don't want to cook the herbs. So a lot of people's ovens don't go low enough to actually, do the best job, and you lose some of the flavor. So you want like around 90, 100, just low hundreds. And sometimes it's hard to get the oven that low. And so one other option that they've actually in the test kitchens found some luck with is microwaving them. So you just do them at 20 seconds, like per time, and checking them. But this can actually, they found, versus the oven, preserve a lot of the flavor and the color. So trying that might be a great option also. So cooking tips then, just using what you have on hand, making a rub, crushing them. You can use that especially for pestos and things like that to release the flavor a little bit. And then always, under season it, add the salt just if you need it. You might be able to just experiment and have a lot of fun. And I do have to say too, there's different things you can do that not talking about, but just really try. You can use it in herb butters or herb cream cheese and things like herbal vinegars, which I think are a great one. And you have to remember with herbal vinegars, you just treat that a little bit like canning, right? So you want to sterilize your materials, and then you would heat the vinegar just below boiling, so about 190 degrees, and then you pour it in the container with the herbs, and then you want to, before you pour the herbs in, you want to sanitize them with it. I know this is getting a little complicated. So sanitize them with a dip of the solution in chlorine bleach. There's a ratio of 1 teaspoon per 6 cups of water. We can send this to you too, but just 3 to 4 sprigs per about 2 cups of the vinegar, and you can use whatever kind of vinegar you want. There's different things. Some people feel red wine vinegar overpowers the herbs, and sometimes the white one might be too strong. So you want to fill the sterilized containers then with that vinegar, and then it keeps longer in the fridge. But you can do it the other way. And the herb oils, you got to be careful with those. There's been some food-borne illnesses from that botulism. So just, you want to be careful with that, and use it more just kind of as you're going to use the dish, just using that a little bit before fresh use, I guess, versus preserving it. So I'm trying to think if there's other things people have asked, but those are kind of the main ones, I think. And so let's see, just wanted to say, we're having an evaluation following this, and we really appreciate your time. And then this is how you could get to more of our classes. So we're both on Eventbrite. And so we have, Anne has a pokegardening.eventbrite.com. And Anne, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm I think I got that. And then you should be able to click right on the slide. It should be a clickable link. And then mine is the one below it. So FCS stands for Family and Consumer Sciences. And then that's our general website. And so we have that. And then I guess we'll just see what we can do with questions. I think we have a lot. And thank you guys all for coming. A great group. I really appreciate everybody's comments. So thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And I'm making a list. We have a lot of stuff to email out to everybody. So there's a lot of questions. I'm already bookmarking lots of things. We'll email to you. So you'll get a pretty big packet of things, I think, with the recipes and some fact sheets and things. I will go back to the beginning and do some of the gardening type questions. We're at 12:49, so I'll make sure that I just try and keep it at 5 minutes for that. I will say, if you have gardening questions, in Polk County, we have a plant clinic that is open to take your questions anytime. We're not open to the public, but you can email or call all the time. So you can contact us. Most county offices have a plant clinic. If you're to call your county extension service main phone number, there is someone there to answer any type of gardening question wherever you are. And actually, if you're in other states as well, extension is by county. So go to your state's main extension website. If you can't find it, you can email me and I'll get you to where you need to be. Sometimes it can be a little bit hidden, could be through the university that's there, or could be through your county. But everybody should have a resource locally that can help you even more. So that's good if we don't get to your questions. Okay, let's see. There were quite a few cilantro questions. Cilantro, I think, is a little bit tricky. I have not had the greatest luck growing it. It's just too hot for it right now. It doesn't really ever get very big anyway. So do the best you can with it. It's probably going to be pretty seasonal in that it will grow in the cool season and you won't get to go through summer. Now, some people probably can, but I haven't had great luck with it. I do know that here in Central Florida, people like to grow cilantro instead. It can handle the hot summer temperatures. It looks extremely different than cilantro, and I will send information on that in the email as well. It's totally different looking, but it has a similar flavor to cilantro, and it can grow in the hot months. I think it's from Puerto Rico or somewhere like that. So it's great for our climate. Always look south of here, South America, those types of places for plants that do well in our summer months. They're great, plants for us to grow here. Let's see my other questions. Lots of people doing well on basil right now. You can cut that basil all the way back, and it should start to come back again. I'm not going to make a guarantee on that, but it should come back. You can leave a few leaves if you would like to. If you have trouble growing, I see there's a question on growing oregano from seed. Some seeds can be tricky to grow. They need clean potting media to get started. There can be issues in the soil, such as the soil is still breaking down, so the soil is taking nutrients, and then the seed won't germinate. I would say if you routinely have issues with seed, you may want to start with either a cutting or, just purchase a small container plant to get that one started. Let's see what else I have in here. Yeah, lots of cilantro questions. Try your cilantro this winter and see if it does better. So try your culantro for summer and try cilantro when it's cooler. You can grow herbs on a lanai, screened patio, that sort of thing, not a problem at all. The issues happen when you get inside the house. You got your air conditioner on, it's pretty dry, you may not have the light you need. So I typically kind of do the same thing with herbs as I do with houseplants, is every once in a while they get they get a field trip outside to kind of hang out and then move them back in again. Full sun for most herbs. They can do a little bit of partial. My herbs are in, well, my herbs are almost in, they're probably in a little bit of partial sun, particularly in the summer months. The parsley does pretty well in partial sun. Full sun, you could do, your rosemary would want to do a full sun. Cuban oregano could do full sun. Full sun means 6 hours a day or more of full sun. Summer's the trickiest time to grow many things in Central Florida, just so you know. Dill, I've always grown from seed, so you may want to try that. I've just grown the traditional dill from seed. I've direct sowed it into the ground and it did pretty well. Let's see. Iguanas in the garden. Wow, we don't have that here in Polk County. That would be a good, if you have a iguana type question, or we don't get a lot of critters eating things, random raccoons eating pineapples and stuff like that. I'm going to guess that iguanas are probably pretty similar to squirrels, deer, raccoons, possums, armadillos, in that really there's not a ton that you can do for them. You know, you can't trap any of those things. Yes, parsley and dill are great for butterflies. That's a great thing to mention. So if you have a butterfly garden, all of these you can grow in your butterfly garden. You know, just be careful when you're harvesting, because I harvested a bunch of parsley one year and there was a ton of butterfly eggs on it and I felt very sad. And so I always plant extra for them and I look over the leaves before I harvest. Rainfall can be really hard this time of year. High humidity can be hard this time of year. Don't be putting any extra irrigation on anything if you're getting summer rainfall, you know, daily. Make sure your soil is drying out. If it looks like you're losing stuff to, you know, fungus or anything like that, you know, like it's damping off, the base of the plants are turning black or brown, that's probably the soil is too wet. So if you can move it somewhere where it can dry out a little bit, or change out a different potting mix for next time. Pest issues. Now remember, you're eating these things, so be mindful and read your labels for pest control. I'm going to send out a couple pest control handouts in the email that we'll send out as well. Okay. And then, yes, we're recording. We'll get you copies of things. We have some good guides for you. All right, Andrea, you want to move on to I think I got most of the gardening ones.
Yeah, I don't think there are a ton. I was trying to look through so many. Just one person mentioned fat, and I have to say too, I'm sorry if I alluded to fat being bad. It's not what it used to be, where we used to think low fat was really important. It's just which fats we use. So just healthier fats would be better. So the oils and fatty fish and nuts and seeds versus the fat in meat. So that's kind of what I was getting at there. And yeah, cilantro becomes coriander. Do you see any more, Anne? I think someone at the very beginning asked about lemongrass. And just the leaves are very flavorful for things like tea and stuff like that. Looks like there's actually antimicrobial properties of using the stem of lemongrass. So
it gets very, very big. So just be careful when you put it in your landscape. You know, it's going to be a 6 foot tall and wide. Other people have clearly grown it too. Yes, you only have to plant it once to realize. It's really easy to grow and it's great, but it gets huge. So do not put it in a little tiny container.
Yeah, I did mine just after a while. It just kind of had trouble then.
Low light's going to be tricky for a lot of herbs to grow. You kind of need partial sun. for most everything. Sometimes the parsley can do a little bit of shade, but that's going to be tricky if you can grow it. I don't know what you're going to get in a lot of shade. I might have to look up some things for you on that. There also is a question about chamomile. I have not grown that. I feel like it might need a little bit of shade. Oh, you know what? I did think of one for shade. I don't know if you'll use it much, but comfrey and, oh gosh, the name just escaped my head. Cardamom. Those are both shade plants, and you could grow, I don't know how it'll do inside, but the gingers and stuff are shade plants. Dangerous for dogs and cats and animals, or herbs that are dangerous. There's not a great resource that lists everything. I would say many things are poisonous. I always go with assume something is poisonous because most things are, as far as plants. The ASPCA has good lists of plants that are problematic for animals. So the ASPCA is going to be your best bet for that. And it's pretty easy to find if you just, put it in Google. Andrea, there's some questions on washing herbs. Assuming you just say the same thing as you do with vegetables.
Yeah, so just wash them under running water, and they don't recommend using rinses or things like that, or soaps or vinegars or bleaches or anything like that. They found the best way, and they've tested it, and so it's really recommended is just the cool running water would be great when you're washing your herbs. So that would be important, and then drying them if you're preserving them longer versus using them.
Okay, greenhouse, you can grow herbs in a greenhouse, not a problem. As weather gets cold, I can't imagine being in a greenhouse right now. You won't probably grow much in a greenhouse right now in Central Florida, but yeah, they'll totally grow there. Yep. Yeah, I think we got many things. If for some reason, because there's a lot of chat, if we didn't get it, even if you aren't in our county, you can contact me via email and we'll get those questions answered on growing. I'm sure Andrea would say the same.
Yep.
And then again, if you're somewhere else and I need to refer you, we'll find out who.
Thank you guys for all your support today. Appreciate it. Glad you could be here, and we hope to see you again.
Yep, I'll just answer one more. I just saw a couple more coming. I have a hard time stopping the questions. Any type of container is fine. Just make sure it has drainage holes in the bottom. Clay will have to be watered more often. And full sun everywhere is 6 hours of sun. So partial would be, I would say 3 to 4 hours of sun per day. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. I'll end the meeting, Anne. Does that sound good? Thank you, everybody.